Hello again, my dear listeners. I hope everything is going well today. Today's story tells how old wounds, reopened after many years, are reignited by a fake marriage that slowly turns into reality. A story filled with heartbreak, tension, buried emotions, and a powerful bond that grows stronger over time awaits you. You'll enjoy listening to it all the way through. The first time I saw the fake wife ad, I laughed so hard I nearly choked on instant ramen. The second time I saw it, I applied. That should tell you everything you need to know about the week I was having, but not enough about the way my stomach dropped straight through the floor when I arrived at the interview address, stepped into a marble foyer that smelled like white lilies and money, and came face to face with the woman who had taught me, at 16, exactly how cruel another girl could be. Celeste Hart looked up from the long black table in the entry hall, like she had expected anyone in the world except me. For one suspended, airless second, neither of us moved. Then she set down the pen in her hand with terrifying care and said my name in that low, elegant voice I had once hated so much I used to hear it in my nightmares. Lena. No one had called me that like a wound in 11 years. I should have turned around right then. I should have spun on my heel, marched back out past the doorman, and let my Metro card and my pride figure out how to split the last $9 in my wallet. Instead, I stood there in my thrifted coat with a fraying cuff, a tote bag digging into my shoulder, and stared at the woman who had made my senior year of school feel like public execution with better lighting. She was even more beautiful than I remembered, which felt both unfair and extremely on brand. At 17, Celeste had already been polished like a blade. At 28, she looked expensive enough to bankrupt small countries. Dark hair swept back, pearl earrings, black silk blouse, posture so precise it could have cut glass. The same gray eyes. The same impossible calm. The same face that had once looked at me across a crowded music room and smiled like a secret right before she destroyed me with it. I actually laughed, not because anything was funny, because sometimes your nervous system reaches for comedy the way drowning people reach for air. You, I said. Her throat moved. Yes. This is your ad? Yes. I dug the printed page out of my tote like I was presenting evidence at a murder trial. Seeking discreet, legal spouse for temporary arrangement. Compensation. Generous. Must be comfortable with public events, cohabitation, confidentiality, and child-friendly home environment. I looked from the paper to her. You are asking strangers to apply to be your wife. A flicker of something unreadable crossed her face. Formerly strangers, in your case. Oh, good, I said. That makes it less deranged. Lena. No. I took a step backward. Absolutely not. Whatever weird rich people disaster this is, I am not interested in being involved. Not for $1 million. It's half that. I blinked. What? The compensation, she said. It's $500,000 for 6 months, not one. I hate that I hesitated. I hate even more that she saw it. It had been a spectacularly terrible month. My landlord had upgraded from passive-aggressive texts to legal-looking envelopes. My freelance illustration work had thinned to a trickle after a client folded without paying me. My mother's physical therapy bills sat in a neat, accusing stack on my kitchen table, each one a fresh reminder that strokes do not care whether your daughter is underemployed and one bad decision away from selling her furniture for grocery money. I had answered the ad at 1 in the morning with wine on my breath and humiliation in my bloodstream. I thought it was a joke. Or a scam, or the kind of rich, eccentric nonsense I could mock with my roommate while we rationed oat milk and split rent calculations like military strategy. I sent a sarcastically polished application, attached my mostly respectable resume, and forgot about it until a woman from a private legal office called the next day and asked if I could come in for an interview. I came because there was free coffee in the lobby and because curiosity is apparently my most self-destructive trait. Celeste lifted a hand slightly, not quite reaching for me. Not quite not. Please, stay for 10 minutes. If you still want to leave after I explain, I won't stop you. You couldn't stop me. No, she said quietly. I suppose I couldn't. That should have pleased me. Instead, it landed somewhere sharp under my ribs. I hated the way memory made fools of the body. Part of me was standing in a limestone townhouse on the Upper East Side. Another part was 16 again. Cheap blazer, scholarship badge hidden in my pocket, trying not to visibly flinch every time Celeste Hart walked into a room with that cool pack of girls orbiting her like planets around a sun cruel enough to burn them all. I should tell you that Celeste hadn't bullied me in the cartoon way people imagine when they say the word bully. She had never shoved me into lockers. She had never pulled my hair or dumped a drink over my head. Celeste had specialized in the kind of cruelty that left no bruises for teachers to photograph. She had looked at my shoes and then at me and made silence feel like ridicule. She had turned lunch tables into invisible borders. She had once asked, in front of 3 prefects and a girl I desperately wanted to impress, whether my scholarship included social coaching or if the school expected me to just improvise. Then, when something happened between us that I didn't understand yet and she understood too well, she had done something worse than mock me. She had made everyone believe I was the problem. So no, I was not interested in staying for 10 minutes. Unfortunately, my bank account, my mother's medical bills, and my lifelong inability to let a dramatic situation end quickly had formed a coalition. I folded my arms. 9 minutes. Celeste inclined her head like I had granted a treaty. Come in, she said. The room beyond the foyer looked like a magazine spread for people who say words like curated unironically. Tall windows, cream walls, art that cost more than my entire life. A vase of white roses on a low table. There was a file folder waiting on the sofa, 2 glasses of water, and, because the universe enjoys layering absurdity, a plate of tiny iced cookies shaped like wedding rings. I stared at them. Are you being haunted by an evil event planner? For what it's worth, Celeste said. I didn't choose the cookies. Good, I would have had to leave on principle. The corner of her mouth nearly moved. Not quite a smile. Celeste had always looked as if actual smiling might violate a contract. She gestured to the sofa. I remained standing until she sat first. Petty, yes. Deeply satisfying, also yes. Up close, I could see that composure on her was not the same thing as ease. There were faint shadows under her eyes, the kind no concealer fully erased. She looked tired in the bones. Good, a nasty part of me thought. Another part, the traitorous part, thought, what happened to you? I'll be direct, she said. My sister died 8 months ago. The room changed shape. Some things don't need embellishment. Death enters, and all the sharp edges go still. I swallowed. I didn't know. She and her husband were killed in a highway accident outside Providence. Her voice remained even, but I saw her fingers tighten once around the stem of her water glass. Their daughter Ava survived. She was in the back seat. Oh, the word came out thin. Oh God. Ava is 7. I've been her primary caregiver since the accident. My gaze dropped to the file folder. Child-friendly home environment. Something in my chest softened before I could stop it. Celeste continued. My sister named me Ava's guardian in her will. Her husband's parents are contesting. They've argued that I'm unmarried, overworked, publicly scrutinized, and unable to provide a stable family environment. She paused. They also want control of the voting shares my sister left in trust for Ava. If they gain custody, they gain practical influence over my family's company and access to the trust. And marriage fixes that? Not by itself. Her eyes met mine. But it helps with optics, with the family court evaluation, with the board, and with the specific narrative being built about me. They're trying to portray me as cold, solitary, and incapable of forming a home. I looked around the townhouse again, the polished surfaces, the impossible art, the echo of expensive quiet. You do realize this place isn't exactly screaming finger painting and bedtime stories. A strange, fleeting expression crossed her face. You haven't seen the upstairs. Before I could respond, the room's stillness cracked with the fast slap of small feet overhead, followed by a woman's fond, exasperated voice in Spanish and a child yelling, "I'm not running, I'm arriving!" Celeste closed her eyes briefly, like someone enduring a private, beloved chaos. Then she stood. A little girl skidded into the doorway in mismatched socks and a purple cardigan inside out. Behind her came an older woman with silver-streaked hair and a look that said she had kept this house standing by force of personality alone. The little girl stopped when she saw me. She had big, solemn brown eyes and a jagged pink scar just above one eyebrow, pale against her skin. My heart did something painful and immediate. "Ava," Celeste said, and her entire voice changed. Softer, warmer, human in a way I had never heard before. "What do we say about running in the hall?" Ava considered this. "Run faster so no one catches you?" The older woman snorted. Celeste pinched the bridge of her nose with long-suffering dignity. "No," she said. "No," Ava echoed cheerfully. Then she looked at me again. "Are you a meeting?" I covered my mouth to hide the smile, trying to betray me. Celeste, to my astonishment, nearly smiled too. "Oh, this is Lena," she said. "Lena, this is Ava. And this is Mrs. Alvarez." Mrs. Alvarez gave me a discerning look that somehow assessed my entire soul in one sweep. "You look like you've made good mistakes," she said. I blinked. "Thank you, I think." "She means you look interesting," Ava explained. "I'm grateful for the translation." Ava stepped closer. "Are you here for the wife thing?" I choked on absolutely nothing. "Mrs. Alvarez," Celeste said with deadly calm, "I thought we agreed not to repeat adult conversations within Ava's hearing." Mrs. Alvarez folded her arms. "I also agreed you would eat lunch before 4, and yet here we are, Cecilia." I stared. "Cecilia?" Celeste looked at me with the expression of a queen who had just been unmasked by her staff. "My full name," she said flatly. It was childish to enjoy that as much as I did. Ava leaned toward me and whispered loudly, "She hates it." I gathered. For the first time since I walked in, a laugh escaped me that didn't taste like panic. Celeste watched it happen. Something about the way she looked at me then, too still, too intent, as if she had been starving next to a locked pantry for years, made my pulse stumble. I hated that too. I did leave that afternoon, technically. I made it all the way to the sidewalk, stood under the awning with cold wind knifing through my coat, and opened the notes app on my phone to type a message to my landlord that began with, "I am trying my best," and ended with a sentence about partial payment schedules that made me want to lie down in traffic. Then my mother called from the rehab center. She was having a good speech day, and which meant every word sounded hard-won and precious. She asked whether I had eaten lunch. She reminded me not to skip my own doctor appointment for the migraine medication refill. She said the physical therapist thought she might be able to manage 3 stairs with a cane by summer. I told her that was amazing. She told me I sounded tired. I lied and said I wasn't. When we hung up, I stood there with my phone in my freezing hand and thought of $500,000. Thought of the mold blooming behind my bathroom radiator. Thought of the way Ava's cardigan had been inside out, because apparently, even in mansions, children were still children. Thought of Celeste saying, "My sister died," in a voice so controlled, it felt one dropped plate away from shattering. Then I did what any sensible, self-respecting woman with unresolved trauma would do. I went back inside and asked to see the contract. Celeste did not look triumphant. That bothered me more than triumph would have. If she had smirked, if she had deployed any of the smug, immaculate superiority I remembered from school, I could have hated her cleanly. But she only nodded once, as if she understood the cost of my return, and called for her attorney. His name was Oliver Grant. He had the air of a man who had chosen law because it let him weaponize punctuation. He walked me through the terms while Celeste sat across from me in silence. 6-month legal marriage. Cohabitation in the Hart townhouse for credibility. Attendance at specified public and private events. Discretion regarding the arrangement. Half the payment upon marriage, half upon completion, with additional funds placed in escrow for immediate access to approved family medical expenses. I almost stopped him there. Family medical expenses? Celeste answered before Oliver could. Your mother's rehab invoices. My office had them verified after your application. Ice slid down my spine. You investigated me? I vetted applicants for a legal arrangement involving a child, as she said. Yes. Something hot and angry flared through the shame. You had no right. No, she said. Probably not. That answer disarmed me more than defense would have. Oliver cleared his throat with professional discomfort. Ms. Brooks, you would also have independent legal representation. We've already retained someone if you'd like her. Entirely your choice. And if I back out early, then payment is prorated unless there is breach, fraud, or public misconduct. I looked at Celeste. And if you humiliate me even once, I walk. Oliver blinked. Celeste didn't. Put it in, she said. He stared at her. That is not standard language. It is now. I should not have felt satisfaction at making a billionaire-adjacent attorney amend a contract with my emotional damage like a special dietary restriction. But I did. I read every page because poverty makes you suspicious and trauma makes you meticulous. There were clauses about image consultants, schooling privacy, social media silence, and one very grim section about paparazzi contingencies. There was also a paragraph stating, in blunt legal prose, that the marriage would not require physical intimacy beyond mutually agreed public appearances. My face warmed. I hated that it warmed. Celeste noticed. Of course she did. She noticed everything. We can adjust the public affection clause, she said. I didn't say anything. You frowned at line 22. I frown at capitalism in all its forms. For the first time, the corner of her mouth actually lifted. It was small, fleeting, ruinous. I signed 3 hours later with a pen so heavy it felt ceremonial. When Oliver left, the room went strangely quiet. The file sat between us like an organ I had just donated by accident. So, I said, am I supposed to call you my darling in public, or is there a manual? There's a packet, Celeste said. I stared. She pointed to a cream folder on the table. Schedules, biographical overlap, likely press questions, household staff, Ava's routines, allergy information, and a list of my family members ranked by threat level. I picked up the folder. You made me a wife binder. It was assembled by my chief of staff. I am absolutely putting that on my resume. Her gaze flicked over my face, and something in it turned unexpectedly soft. Your resume was already interesting. That landed harder than it should have. I covered by flipping open the folder. The first page was titled Joint Narrative. Under it, in immaculate bullet points, was the fictional story of how Celeste and I had reconnected at a charity art auction 18 months earlier. According to the binder, I was an illustrator specializing in editorial work, which was true. We had fallen in love slowly over shared museum dates and mutual devotion to black coffee, which was false on a level that felt spiritually offensive. We had kept our relationship private to protect Ava after her parents' death, which was strategically grim and also false. I turned a page. There was a photo section labeled Personal References. You included my college exhibition review, I said slowly. You were good. I looked up. Celeste's expression had shuddered again, but not before I saw the truth underneath it. She hadn't just vetted me. She had followed me. Maybe not closely, maybe not often. but enough to know about a gallery show I'd done 4 years ago in a converted warehouse in Brooklyn that mostly served warm white wine and artistic disappointment. A splinter of unease drove in beside something even less comfortable. "Why me?" I asked. She went still. "You answered the ad." "Lots of people answered the ad, I assume." "Not lots." A pause. "Enough." "That isn't an answer." "No," she said quietly. "It isn't." I hated that part of me wanted the answer anyway. I moved in 3 days later with 2 suitcases, one overwatered fern, my battered sketchbooks, and a level of defensiveness that should have qualified as carry-on luggage. My roommate Priya helped me lug everything upstairs and spent the entire cab ride staring at me like she was deciding whether to slap me, hug me, or stage an intervention. "All three," she said when I told her that. "You're being very unsupportive of my financially creative choices." "I'm being appropriately horrified that you married your rich high school nemesis for money." "I'm not married yet." "You will be tomorrow." "Details." Priya grabbed my wrist before the townhouse door opened. "Lena." Her tone cut through the bravado. She had been the first person I told about St. Margaret's. About the scholarship school with the old brick buildings and cruel girls in polished shoes. About Celeste, whose cruelty had been so precise it took me years to stop mistaking the charged moments between us for proof that I had imagined everything. Priya knew how long it took before I could say stalker rumor without my voice going strange. "If she hurts you again," Priya said, "I am going to commit such profound acts of emotional arson." I pressed my forehead to hers. "Love you too." "I mean it." "I know." Mrs. Alvarez opened the door and took one look at Priya. "You are the friend who hates rich people," she announced. Priya brightened. "With structure and nuance." "You may stay for lunch." Celeste appeared behind her in a cream sweater and dark trousers, her hair loose for once. And the sight of her in something soft made my brain briefly forget its union obligations. She glanced from me to Priya and back. "Hello?" Priya looked her over with the cool focus of someone inspecting a suspiciously elegant snake. "You have exactly one chance with her." Celeste met her gaze without flinching. "I'm aware." Priya, who never cried prettily and therefore avoided it on principle, blinked once too hard. Then she pointed at Celeste and said, "Good," in the tone people usually reserve for sworn vows and small threats. The wedding itself took 12 minutes. City Hall smelled like wet coats and bureaucracy. Oliver handled paperwork. Mrs. Alvarez dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief she pretended not to need. Ava wore a yellow coat and informed the clerk that if anyone said objection, she would bite them. Celeste stood beside me in a white suit so clean and severe it made my simple ivory dress feel like a surrender. When the clerk asked if we took each other lawfully, I expected the words to feel absurd in my mouth. They didn't. They felt heavy. Celeste's voice was steady when she said yes. Mine shook very slightly when I echoed it. Maybe it was the room. Maybe it was memory. Maybe it was the fact that the first time Celeste Hart had ever touched me without an audience, I had been 16 and stupid and standing too close to her in the music room, both of us breathing hard around something unnamed. She had lifted one trembling hand to my jaw. Her thumb had brushed my cheek. I had thought, with the catastrophic sincerity of youth, that my life was about to begin. Instead, it had detonated. Now, at 28, she slid a slim platinum band onto my finger, and her skin was cool and dry and devastatingly careful. I did not look at her. She did look at me. I felt it like sunlight through closed lids. Afterward, photographers were waiting outside. That part had been unavoidable. We had arranged for a controlled press release to blunt the rumor mill and frame the marriage as a private choice made public only because of legal proceedings. I had barely stepped onto the sidewalk before flashbulbs started. Celeste's hand landed at the small of my back. I went rigid. She leaned close without moving her smile. "Breathe," she murmured. "You don't have to look at them. Look at me." The irony nearly killed me on the spot. Still, I did what she said. Her face became the center of my vision. Gray eyes, impossibly calm. Wind lifting one dark strand across her cheek. Her hand warm through the thin fabric at my back, steady and firm. The photographers shouted questions. How long have you been together? Why the secrecy? Is this about the custody case? Mrs. Hart, over here. Keep walking, Celeste said softly. I did. The car door closed on silence, so sudden it rang. I realized I had been gripping her wrist hard enough to leave marks. I let go like I'd touched a live wire. Sorry. Celeste glanced down at the faint red crescents on her skin. You don't have to apologize for that. That's convenient for you. Your public image just married a feral illustrator. Her mouth twitched. Duh, you did very well. I forgot my own fake anniversary. It's in the binder. I hate the binder. You annotated page 14. Because the fake museum date was logistically weak. For a second, her composure slipped, and she laughed. It was low and startled, and so unlike the Celeste I had carried in my head for 11 years that I turned to stare. The laugh vanished as if she regretted its escape. That, I said before I could stop myself, was new. Her gaze shifted to the rain-striped window. Not entirely. Entirely enough. She didn't answer. The first week in the townhouse felt like playing house inside a museum that occasionally produced a child and a woman who smelled like cedar, an expensive soap, and unresolved history. My room was on the 3rd floor, at the front, with tall windows overlooking the street and a bed so large it felt accusatory. The closet had been emptied for me. My favorite brand of cheap peppermint tea appeared in the kitchen within 24 hours of my arrival. A digital drawing tablet I had mentioned in passing during the interview turned up on the desk by the window, unopened, as if conjured by guilt and excellent logistics. I carried it downstairs and found Celeste in the breakfast room, reviewing documents, while Ava built a lopsided block castle on the rug. What is this? I asked, holding up the tablet. Celeste looked at it. A tool for your work. I know what it is. Why is it in my room? I assumed yours was old. That is not an answer. Ava looked between us with delighted interest. You two fight like married people already. Thank you. A tiny analyst, I muttered. Celeste set down her pen. Your tablet was 8 years old. The charging port is damaged. The hinge on your laptop case is cracked. You've been doing professional illustration work with equipment that should have retired under honorable circumstances. I stared. Did you go through my things? No. Priya told Mrs. Alvarez, who told me, after determining that I was apparently not allowed to romance you with appliances, but could at least stop being impractical with money. I blinked once. I'm sorry, did my roommate and your housekeeper form a labor union against us? Informally. I should have refused the tablet on principle. Instead, I set it very carefully on the table and said, You cannot buy your way out of having been awful. Celeste didn't flinch. I know. The words landed harder than any defense could have. Ava held up a plastic horse. Do you want this horse to be married too? Neither of us answered quickly enough. Great, Ava said. Now they're married. That was how my pink plastic horse became legally attached to Celeste's black plastic horse beneath a breakfast table while she signed merger documents, and I tried not to unravel because she had memorized the condition of my electronics. The thing about forced proximity is that it cheats. You can maintain righteous resentment at a distance. Distance lets you preserve clean outlines. Villain. Victim. Then you move into someone's house and find out she leaves the hall light on because Ava hates dark corners after the accident. You notice she eats toast over the sink at 6 in the morning because she forgets meals when she's anxious. You hear her pacing her office after midnight when she thinks everyone else is asleep. By the end of the first week, I had learned that Celeste's shoes came off the second she got home, that she loosened her hair when a headache started, that she drank terrible black coffee and preferred quiet over music when she worked. I learned Ava liked banana slices only if they were arranged in circles, that Mrs. Alvarez watched courtroom dramas while folding laundry, and that the Hart townhouse, for all its polished surfaces, was full of evidence that grief had moved in first and left things slightly rearranged. Crayon drawings covered one side of the upstairs refrigerator. A tiny pair of glitter sneakers lived under the grand staircase. In the den, beneath the severe abstract paintings, there was a blanket fort folded into one corner like a treaty between worlds. None of it matched the version of Celeste I had built to survive her. That didn't mean it erased anything. It just meant I had to work harder to hate her cleanly. The first big event was a museum gala full of glass walls, donor smiles, and enough money in one room to solve every problem I had ever had except the woman standing beside me. I wore a midnight blue dress chosen by Celeste's stylist, which meant it fit like it had been plotted. When I came downstairs, Ava clapped. Mrs. Alvarez crossed herself for theatrical effect, and Celeste looked up from her phone and forgot, for one naked second, how to be expressionless. That second nearly ruined me. She crossed the foyer and stopped just close enough to be dangerous. "You look beautiful." I touched one earring because it gave my hands a job. "This dress is doing aggressive teamwork. I don't think it needs help." Before I could decide whether to breathe or combust, Ava wedged herself between us and announced, "You're doing the intense eye thing again." The gala passed in a blur of champagne, camera flashes, and rich people pretending they had never Googled me. Celeste was perfect at it. She steered conversations, intercepted barbed questions, and kept a hand lightly at my back as if she knew exactly how much pressure I could stand. When one woman asked whether I found it difficult adjusting to Celeste's world, Celeste smiled and said, "Lena improves every room she enters. That's not an adjustment. It's a correction." I should have laughed it off. Instead, I stared at her like I had never learned how. Later, on the terrace, a photographer asked for a few posed shots. "Closer," he said. We stepped in. "Hand on her waist, Mrs. Hart." Celeste's palm settled against my bare side where the dress dipped low. Every muscle in me went taut. "A little more natural," the photographer said. Celeste leaned near enough that only I could hear. "You're holding your breath," or "Shh, you are touching my skin." "I'm aware." Her thumb shifted once. Tiny movement. Total catastrophe. "Say something annoying," I whispered through my smile. "You annotated the binder." "That isn't annoying." "Oh, it was to my chief of staff." The photographer declared the shot perfect. I spent the next 10 minutes in the restroom looking at my own reflection, like she had personally betrayed me. When I came out, Piper Dawson was waiting near the corridor with the same polished face she had worn in school when she wanted to pretend cruelty was an accident. "Well," she said, eyeing my ring, "you landed well." I smiled with all my teeth. "You aged exactly as expected." Her laugh came out thin. I just meant Celeste always liked control. Before I could answer, Celeste appeared at my side. "Piper," she said in a tone cool enough to preserve organs. Piper's expression tightened. "We were only talking." "I'm sure you were." Celeste turned to me. "Dessert is being served." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Piper vanished on instinct. In the elevator down, I said, "You didn't have to rescue me." "That wasn't rescue." "What was it?" Her eyes stayed on the glowing numbers above the door. "Correction." That one word sat under my skin for days. The week after, I had dinner with the Harts and learned that Celeste's family treated civility the way surgeons treat anesthetic: useful, measured, and never mistaken for kindness. Victor Hart, Celeste's grandfather, looked like inherited power given human shape. He smiled at me over soup as if he were complimenting a chair. "And what exactly do you do, Lena?" "I illustrate." "How flexible." I smiled back. "That's a gentle way to say underpaid." He ignored the joke. "Ava needs permanence, not improvisation." Something changed at the table, not loudly, not visibly if you didn't know where to look. But Celeste's glass touched the linen with a precise click that made everyone else go still. "You may critique my business decisions," she said, calm as a winter road. "You may not speak about my wife as if she is decorative, and you may not use Ava to make a point." Victor's smile thinned. "At my table." "Then we're done at it." She took my hand and walked me out in front of all of them. In the car, when I finally got my voice back, I said, "That was recklessly attractive." Celeste turned to me, startled, and for one glorious second, I saw an actual laugh break through her poise. Then she realized she was still holding my hand. We both looked down. Neither of us let go quickly enough. That night, I couldn't sleep. So I went downstairs and found Celeste in the kitchen wearing silk pajama pants and one of Ava's camp shirts with a glittering jellyfish on the front. I stopped in the doorway. "You're wearing whimsy." Ava said I needed it. She was right, unfortunately. She handed me tea. We stood at opposite counters in a pool of warm light while the rest of the house slept. Without her suit, without the armor of the day, she looked tired in a way that made me ache against my own will. "Ava says you pace after midnight," I said. Her fingers tightened around her mug. "Ava notices too much. She gets it from you." Something softened in her face. We spoke quietly after that. About Ava's fear of thunderstorms, about grief, about my mother's rehab, about nothing useful and everything dangerous. The longer we stood there, the harder it got to remember why distance had once seemed possible. Then her gaze dropped to my mouth. I felt it like a hand. "Don't," I said, though the word came out unsteady. Pain flickered across her face, quick and honest. "As you wish." I fled upstairs so angry at myself I barely slept at all. The next afternoon, Ava split her lip at the park. There was blood, panic, a nurse with cartoon earrings, and 12 horrible minutes before Celeste arrived at urgent care, looking composed only if you had never seen real fear before. She crossed the waiting room, asked 6 rapid questions, kissed Ava's forehead, then came back and saw the blood on my sleeve. "You stayed calm for her," she said. "There wasn't anyone else." "That isn't the same thing." She sat beside me, opened a disinfectant wipe, and cleaned Ava's blood from my wrist with painstaking care. It was such a small gesture, I could have laughed at myself for noticing it so much. Instead, I heard myself say, "You make details feel bigger than disasters." Her hand paused against my skin. "That's how I survive disasters." After that, surviving in the same house with her got harder. There were too many routines. Mornings with Ava at the breakfast table, evenings when Celeste loosened her hair and looked more like a woman than a verdict. The way she asked whether I had eaten when I worked too late in the studio room, she had turned over to me. The way she stood in doorways as if entering my space required permission she did not trust herself to assume. I also met Madeline Shore twice more and disliked myself more each time. Madeline was one of those women who could say good evening and somehow make it sound inherited. She had been close to the Hart family for years. At a charity luncheon, she kissed Celeste's cheek with easy familiarity, then turned to me with a smile sharp enough to shave with. "You're good for her image," she said. I lifted a brow. "Only her image?" Madeline's gaze flicked to Celeste, who was speaking with a trustee across the room. Celeste has always been very disciplined with affection. I hadn't noticed. She sipped her wine. "Then you're already more dangerous than I thought." It should not have bothered me. It bothered me all afternoon. That night, while Ava slept and rain tapped softly against the windows, I found Celeste in the library reviewing deposition notes. I leaned in the doorway and said, "Were you ever engaged to Madeline?" Celeste looked up so sharply I almost smiled. Briefly. Of course she had been. Of course my ribcage chose that moment to become a percussion instrument. "Briefly," I repeated. "How romantic." "It was arranged by family expectations and mutual exhaustion," she said. "Romance was not involved." Comforting. Her gaze narrowed slightly. Are you jealous? I laughed too quickly. That's adorable. Is it inaccurate? Deeply. She closed the file. I did not love Madeline. Something in the room shifted. Rain at the windows, lamplight on dark wood, her voice lower than before. I folded my arms. Should I congratulate your honesty? No. She stood. You should know that if you choose to be hurt by me, I would prefer it be for current reasons. I stared at her. That is a terrible line. It's a true one. She was close now, not quite near enough to touch. I could smell cedar and rain and the dangerous possibility of making another mistake I would spend a decade trying to survive. Celeste, I said. Lena. The house settled around us. Somewhere upstairs, Ava coughed in her sleep, and the spell snapped before it could kill me. Celeste stepped back first. You should go to bed. Probably. I did not. I lay awake until 2 in the morning, replaying every almost. The midpoint of disaster arrived disguised as a school fundraiser. St. Margaret's was hosting a donor concert. The Hart Foundation sponsored half the scholarships. Judge Mendel would be there, along with the custody evaluator. Celeste told me over breakfast like she was handing me a blade and apologizing for the grip. We should attend, she said. No. Ava, who was building a cereal wall around her banana slices, looked up. Then don't? Mrs. Alvarez muttered, The child is a genius, and kept buttering toast. Celeste met my gaze. If you refuse, I'll go alone. That should have been the end of it. Instead, something in me bristled at being protected. I hated that almost as much as I hated the school itself. So I went. The building smelled exactly the same. Polish, old wood, ambition. The first hallway we walked down was the one where Celeste had once asked if my scholarship came with social coaching. My body remembered before my mind did. By the time we reached the auditorium, my teeth were clenched hard enough to hurt. No one corners you tonight, Celeste said quietly. I almost laughed. Years too late for that. I made it through the first half out of stubbornness alone. I even spoke to Judge Mendel, smiled at donors, and stood beside Celeste like I wasn't bleeding under my skin. Then intermission happened. I stepped into the corridor for air and heard my own name. Not Lena. Elena Brooks. Full, formal, familiar in the ugliest possible way. 2 former classmates stood near the trophy case. Taryn Malloy was one of them. The other woman, whose survival instincts had never impressed anyone, said, I still can't believe she ended up married to Celeste after all that obsession. The hallway went white at the edges. Another voice joined in from farther down. Wasn't there some incident in the music room? Taryn lowered her voice. Celeste handled it. Elena was always intense. Handled it. I was 17 again. Cheap blazer, burning face. Headmistress asking if I understood boundaries, while Celeste stood beside her in perfect silence. Then a hand wrapped gently around my forearm. Celeste. She stood next to me, expression unreadable. No, she said into the corridor's brittle quiet. I didn't. Taryn went pale. The other woman looked ready to spontaneously disappear. Celeste let go of my arm at once, as if remembering touch required consent. We're leaving. We made it to an empty practice room before I pulled away. Don't manage me like a crisis, I snapped. Her face changed. That is not what I'm doing. Then what are you doing? You heard them. Yes. And I should have stopped it years ago. The fury I had spent 11 years freezing came back all at once. You told them I was making you uncomfortable, I said. You stood there while the headmistress treated me like I was diseased. I left because of you. Do you understand that? I spent years thinking I had imagined everything between us and deserved what came after. Her breathing changed. Barely. Enough. You did start it, I said. In the music room. You touched me first. I know. No, you don't get to say that like a tidy fact. Then Celeste said, very quietly, when my father found us there, He told me if I didn't destroy it, he would. I went still. She looked unlike herself. Not polished, not composed, just flayed open by memory. He had already guessed, she said. About me, about the way I looked at you. He found a note I wrote and never sent. He said if anyone believed I wanted you, he would have your scholarship reviewed and your mother removed from the school clinic. I was 17. I was terrified. So I made myself cruel. I thought if I turned on you fast enough, hard enough, he would stop looking. The room stopped breathing. I was wrong, she said. Or weak. Probably both. I hurt you because I was frightened and because I was in love with you and had no idea how to survive that without becoming monstrous. In love with you, it did not make anything smaller. It made everything make horrible sense. Her staring in class, the jealousy, the panic in the music room, the viciousness afterward, too sudden and too sharp to be casual. I sat on the piano bench because my knees failed me. Celeste stayed where she was, as if coming closer would be an act of violence. My father died 3 years ago, she said. I looked for you after. I found your work online. I wanted to apologize and decided that showing up would be selfish. A bitter smile crossed her mouth. Then you answered the ad. You recognized my name. Yes. And still let me come. Yes. Why? She looked helpless in a way I had never seen. Because Ava needed someone kind. Because I trusted you more than anyone else I met. Because when I saw your name, I realized there is apparently no version of my life in which I can stop wanting one impossible chance to do better by you. My eyes burned. You don't get forgiven because you were scared. I know. You don't get to use love to clean this up. I know. I still don't know what to do with how badly you hurt me. Her expression softened into something so sad it made my throat ache. You don't have to know tonight. That ended me more effectively than any dramatic plea could have. I cried. Furious, humiliated tears. She didn't touch me. She only crossed to the piano when I was done shaking, set a folded handkerchief beside me like a peace offering from another century, and stepped back again. I laughed wetly. Who even carries a handkerchief? A woman raised by monsters with excellent tailoring. I looked up at her then, really looked. Did you mean to kiss me that day? I asked. Yes. The answer hit like a dropped stare. Then why didn't you? Her voice lowered. Because I did not trust myself to stop there. Heat flashed low in my body, treacherous and immediate. She took one step toward me. I stood so fast the bench scraped, her entire body locked. Stop apologizing every time you move, I said, breathless. Then stop looking at me like that. Like what? Like you might forgive me long enough to make me reckless. For one insane second, I thought she would cross the room anyway. Instead, she opened the door and held it for me with terrifying restraint. When we left the school, nothing between us was where it had been before. After St. Margaret's, everything between us became harder to deny and easier to feel. We did not suddenly become healthy, uncomplicated women with admirable boundaries. We became quieter with each other, gentler, more careful, if anything. My anger was still alive. So was her guilt. So was the impossible fact that I had started noticing the softness beneath her control and wanted more of it in spite of myself. Then, Ava got the flu and blew the last of our restraint to pieces. For 2 nights, Celeste and I took turns sitting beside Ava's bed, trading cold washcloths and medicine cups and whispered reassurances. At 4 in the morning on the second night, I found Celeste sitting on the nursery floor with her head tilted against the mattress, Ava's hand tangled in her sleeve. You need sleep, I whispered. So do you. I had a nap. You lost consciousness in a chair for 17 minutes. Even exhausted, I smiled. You timed me? I time everything when I'm frightened. That answer did something low and dangerous to my chest. When Ava finally slept without waking, Celeste and I stood outside the bedroom door in the dim hall light, both of us looking wrung out and too honest for the hour. She asked for you, I said. She asked for both of us. I laughed softly. Fake wife bonus. Celeste's gaze held mine. Nothing about what you are to her feels fake. I looked at her, really looked. The exhaustion, the fear, the woman under the polish. If you had apologized years ago, I asked, would it have mattered? For me, yes. She took a breath. For you, I don't know. I think I would have deserved whatever door you closed. The honesty in that undid me. I touched her wrist before I could stop myself. Celeste looked down at my fingers like they were a miracle she didn't trust. I don't know what I'm doing, I admitted. Neither do I. That's a terrible comfort. It's the cleanest truth I have. Then she lifted one hand, slowly enough for me to refuse, and cupped my face the way she had once done in the music room. Only this time, there was no father outside the door, no headmistress, no audience waiting to decide what kind of girl I was allowed to be. If I kiss you, she said quietly, it cannot be because I'm taking something. My breath caught. What if I let you? Her eyes closed for one brief, wrecked second. When she kissed me, it felt like years collapsing at once. Her mouth was warm and shaking, careful only in the permission, not the wanting. I made a humiliating noise into the kiss. She pulled back just enough to breathe, forehead resting against mine. That seems unfair, I whispered. What does? That you get to kiss like you've been practicing alone. A breath of laughter touched my mouth. I might have. The second kiss was slower and somehow worse for my self-control. By the time we stepped apart, both of us were shaking. Then Ava coughed in her sleep, and we sprang away like guilty teenagers, which would have been more dignified if Celeste hadn't put a hand over her eyes and said, "This is absurd." "It is," I said. "Continue later." She laughed, and I thought with alarming certainty that I could get addicted to being the reason. After that, the house turned treacherous in the loveliest ways. We kissed in doorways after Ava went to bed. We sat up too late in the library while she pretended to read briefs, and I pretended not to stare at her mouth. She left meals outside my studio when I worked through migraines. I learned that when she got overwhelmed, her voice went quieter, not sharper. She learned that when I joked too much in a row, I was usually frightened. Ava noticed, of course. At dinner one night, she pointed her fork at us and said, "You're less fake now." I nearly inhaled a pee. Celeste only said, "Bah, finish your dinner," with the composure of a woman who absolutely deserved a medal for not choking. I should have known happiness wouldn't be allowed to arrive without paperwork. 3 weeks before the custody hearing, an article hit every outlet that mattered. Someone had dug up the old St. Margaret's rumor and repackaged it for adults. Obsessed scholarship girl, damaged boundaries, suspicious marriage, convenient return. By the time I read the third headline, I was shaking too hard to hold my coffee. Celeste found me in the breakfast room, read the article off my phone, and went perfectly still. "I'll deal with it," she said. The words hit like a slap. "No. This is legal triage, not..." "Not what? Not you deciding how much of me can be sacrificed politely?" She flinched. I hated that it didn't help. The lawyers took over the library within the hour. I told myself I wasn't listening outside the door. I was, obviously, listening outside the door. "If Celeste admits she lied in school," Oliver said, "opposing counsel will call it a pattern of deception. The cleanest response is to keep Lena off the stand, deny relevance, and move on," someone else said. Then Oliver added with the bluntness of expensive panic, "The old rumor only works because she reads as emotionally exposed." My stomach dropped. A chair scraped. Then Celeste said, "Too low? I know." That was enough. Maybe not the whole truth of the room, but enough for me. I had heard hesitation before. I knew how much damage could fit inside it. By the time Celeste reached my room, my suitcase was open. "You heard something," she said. I heard enough. It wasn't all of it. I heard them call the lie plausible, and I heard you give them silence. I zipped the suitcase hard enough to hurt my hand. "I'm not staying to watch you weigh me against strategy again. I was trying to protect you from cross-examination. By letting them call me unstable one more time. By finding a way to tell the truth without risking Ava." There it was. The same old altar, just dressed in adult language. "You don't get to burn me twice on the way to protecting someone else," I said. Pain crossed her face, open and raw. "Lena, listen to me. I love you." Too late can sound exactly like that. I pulled off my ring and set it on the dresser. "You don't get to say that while deciding whether I'm acceptable collateral." Then I left. I spent 2 days pretending misery meant clarity. My mother took one look at my face and managed, through all the effort speech still cost her, "Woman?" I laughed so hard I cried. Yes, unfortunately. On the third morning, Priya burst into my apartment holding her phone like it was a live explosive. "She did it," she said. The courthouse feed shook slightly. The audio was bad. None of that mattered. Celeste sat at the witness table in a charcoal suit, spine straight, face pale with the kind of composure that only exists when someone has decided to lose something on purpose. "Do you wish to amend prior statements regarding the media reports about your wife?" the attorney asked. "Yes," Celeste said. One word, final. "My wife was not obsessed with me at school," she said. "I was the one who pursued her. I was the one who allowed a false narrative to stand because it protected my family's image and my position within it. The harm done to Elena Brooks belongs to me." I stopped breathing. "Are you admitting to deception?" the attorney pressed. "Yes." Oliver looked like a man aging in real time. Celeste kept going anyway. "I hurt the person I loved because I was afraid of being seen. If this court decides that was cowardly, it will be correct. But it will not call Elena Brooks unstable, manipulative, or predatory. She was harmed by me then, and she is being harmed by me now if I let this lie remain useful for even one more hour." The opposing attorney asked whether she understood that the statement could cost her the petition and her role on the board. "Yes," Celeste said. Then why do it?" "Because Ava deserves an adult who tells the truth when it costs something, and because I would rather lose every title attached to my name than let Elena Brooks carry my lie a second time." I sat down so hard, Priya swore and handed me tissues without comment. The ruling came the next day. Celeste got permanent guardianship. The judge cited continuity, stability, and Ava's trust in the home she already knew. The marriage helped, but it wasn't what won. Honesty did. My mother squeezed my hand when I showed her the decision and said one word with enormous effort: "Go." So I went. Mrs. Alvarez opened the townhouse door, hugged me so hard my ribs complained, and said, "She is upstairs pretending paperwork is food." Celeste was in the library. On the desk beside her sat a single envelope. Annulment papers, unsigned. When she saw me, she stood so quickly the chair tipped. "I wasn't going to trap you," she said quietly when she noticed where I was looking. "If you wanted your freedom back, I wanted it clean." I crossed the room slowly because my heart had become a reckless animal. "I watched the hearing." Her throat moved. "Then you know I should have done it sooner." "Yes. I'm sorry." "I know." "I meant all of it," she said. "I loved you then. I love you now. I loved you badly and selfishly, and then tried not to love you at all because I had no right. None of those versions were good enough for you." Her hand shook once. "If you can't stay, I'll live with that. But there is no honest version of this in which you were ever only convenient to me." I took the ring from my coat pocket and set it on the desk. Her face went white. I didn't come to give it back, I said. Something fragile lit in her eyes. I slid the ring toward her. I came because I'm very tired of being your fake wife. For one stunned heartbeat, she didn't move. Then I went around the desk and stood in front of her before courage could evacuate my body. I'm still angry, I said. I'm probably going to be angry for a while. What you did mattered. Love doesn't turn that into a pretty montage. I know. But you told the truth when it could have cost you Ava, your company, everything your family taught you to value. You put me before the lie. Finally. My voice shook. So here is me being reckless. If you still want me, I want something real. Not useful, not strategic. Real. A laugh broke out of her in the middle of tears. That is the most romantic thing anyone has ever said to me. Your standards were raised by the Hart family. They're diseased. That did it. She smiled. Not small, not guarded. A real, bright, disbelieving smile that made me understand exactly why 17-year-old me had been doomed. I want real, she whispered. I have wanted it with you since I was too young to name it. Good, I said, because I'm not signing annulment papers before dinner. She kissed me then, slow and shaking and reverent enough to make my knees unreliable. When we finally broke apart, Ava's voice came from the doorway. I knew it. We sprang apart. Ava stood there in striped socks holding a stuffed octopus. Behind her, Mrs. Alvarez looked smug enough to power the city. So, Ava said, squinting at us, are you fake married or real married now? Celeste and I looked at each other. For the first time, the answer felt simple. Real, I said. Ava nodded. Good. Fake married was confusing. That night, we made grilled cheese in the kitchen, while Ava informed us that real married people should go to aquariums more often and stop keeping secrets in hallways. Mrs. Alvarez cried over the soup pot and denied it violently. Later, when the house was quiet, Celeste slipped the ring back onto my finger and asked, with all the terror of a woman who had finally learned honesty, "Will you stay married to me on purpose?" Yes, I said. You impossible woman, yes. And 3 months later, we held a second ceremony in the garden. Not because the first one hadn't counted, but because I wanted one day that belonged entirely to truth. Priya cried and blamed pollen. My mother came with her cane and called Celeste by her full name on purpose. Ava scattered petals. There were no reporters, no board members, no binders, just the people we chose. Celeste took my hands and said, voice unsteady, "The first time I married you, I was asking for help and hiding half my heart. This time, I am asking only for the chance to spend my life telling you the truth." I told her, "The first time I said yes because I was desperate. This time, I'm saying yes because loving you stopped feeling like a trap and started feeling like home." Ava whispered, loudly, "Gross. Excellent." That night, barefoot under the garden lights, Celeste wrapped her arms around me and murmured, "Mrs. Hart." I leaned back against her. That sounds less fake now. Inside, Ava slept upstairs, too exhausted by cake and flower petals. The windows glowed warm. My mother's laugh still seemed to live in the air. I thought about the ad I had answered as a joke, the girl who had broken me, the woman who had learned at terrible cost how to love me right. When I turned in Celeste's arms, she looked at me with the same disbelief she'd worn in the foyer the day we met again. Only now there was no hunger sharpened by fear, only tenderness. "What?" I asked. Her smile was soft. "I'm still getting used to the fact that you stayed." I touched her face. "I didn't stay for the contract." "I know. I stayed because you're my wife." This time, when she kissed me, there was no audience to fool and nothing left to fake. And that was the least ridiculous part of the whole story.